Our next guest, it is from the Niagara Region Anti-Racism Association. Joining the show now is Saleh Waziruddin. Good afternoon, Saleh. How are you?
Hey, doing good, Steph. Thanks for having me on. As you said, I'm Saleh Waziruddin with the Niagara Region Anti-Racism Association. And how are you doing? I see that you're not a millionaire, according to your last segment, but hopefully you're doing good otherwise.
No, going to have to keep working for just a little bit here. And I just will let you know, Saleh, that I am having a little bit of problems hearing you. You're fine on the radio. I think everyone will be able to hear you fine. But just so you know, if I'm not specifically responding to a question, we're just having a little bit of a technical difficulty. So I'm sure we will do great here. You have written an open letter to the Niagara Region Police Services Board. Tell us what that open letter is requesting.
Yes, actually, it's to a selection committee on regional council. What happens is the police board, they've got 3 seats for councillors, 3 seats for people picked by the province, and there's 1 seat that is picked by the councillors, but it's supposed to be, somebody like us, like you and me, somebody who's not a municipal official or a municipal employee. And so what this letter is saying is they're trying to pick somebody who's never been a police officer. Because oftentimes the public representative, which is what this 7th person is, and even regional councillors and other appointees will all be police officers, and former police officers, I should say. And if you're going to have real civilian, oversight, you need somebody who's not been a police officer. And we're not the only ones saying this in the Niagara Region Anti-Racism Association. The province actually, for their independent police review director, has a rule, a law, saying it has to be somebody who's never been a police officer. So that doesn't, govern the selection of the Niagara Police Board, but it's a good idea, we think. And also, they should also try to pick somebody who's BIPOC, because BIPOC people are 16% now and more of the region, but nobody on the police board is.
And what advantages do you see, Saleh, that someone who has not been a police officer would bring to the board?
It would get some fresh air, and it would be a breath of fresh air. We've seen with the record, like with the Special Investigations Unit, which is also looking at police oversight, often they're former police officers. And the only time recently that I've seen they've ruled that a police officer did something wrong was when it was police officer versus police officer. So they couldn't, they didn't have a choice. Whichever side they picked, they're going to say police officer did something wrong. That's the only time. I think when you have somebody who's not been a police officer, they don't have some of those ties, and they can give a fresh perspective. And we need that. The police leadership here has said that in Canada we have it better than the States in terms of oversight. But that's not actually true. The police forces in the U.S., they're all governed by city or county elected officials, whereas here our elected officials are less than half of the police board.
And Saleh, would you think that these, civilian members, should they have any sort of understanding about police or education about how the procedures work? Because I think that might be, the argument that it's a good idea to have someone who used to be a police officer because they have that greater understanding.
That is a misperception. And I think that might affect people who apply, because people might think, oh, well, you have to have been in the police to be on the board. But no, actually on the board, they're also often looking for other skills like accounting or other skills that can be brought in. The police chief is there. I mean, the police chief can tell them, tell the board about the ins and outs of the rules. But from what I've been told, actually, the committee's already picked who they're going to go with, and I don't know if it's somebody who's never been a police officer, if they even had a choice from the applicants. But it's not too late, because the decision's not made till the regional council meets on the 23rd. But we think if they haven't got people applying who haven't been police officers and who are not BIPOC, then the region needs to be more active in recruiting applications from the people like that, because it's not good enough. We can't just accept it. And it's all personally identifying information. So I don't think there's a way we can find out who all applied. But if they didn't have a choice, then we need to expand the pool.
So that was going to be my next question. You're not aware of, who they're picking from, because that's the big thing. It's like, it is good to, of course, have diversity and to ask for civilian members, but of course those people would have to apply in order to pick them because they have to want to do the job.
That's exactly right. I mean, there's two issues I've seen in general, not just with the police board, but with other boards and committees in general. One is getting diverse application pool to begin with. I mean, if you don't, like you said, if you don't have that, you can't really go anywhere. But even once people apply, there's another barrier, which is actually getting appointed. And sometimes people who haven't had, I call it the shiny resume problem. People who haven't had opportunities where they can shine at their job and so on, they might not know how to put their best foot forward. And so there's also help needed for applicants to get their best qualifications out on the application. Sometimes people don't even have any idea what to put on an application. But because it's personally identifying information, we don't have a way of knowing. And I did try to find out even when they were going to decide so we could put this letter out beforehand, but they hadn't set everything out then. But if they haven't, if their hands were kind of tied, then we need to do better by actively recruiting, getting people to apply outside of the circles of police and into the BIPOC communities.
Well, I think that could be said, Saleh, for a number of different boards. I mean, you outlined the difficulties in people maybe not understanding, how to put their application together in a way that makes it a desirable application. I think the other part is that, people might not just even know that there's an opportunity to be parts of different boards, right? If they're not, listening to our station or really reading the local papers, I guess, like you said, maybe there's more work to be done on just letting people know about these types of boards in general.
That's exactly right. And, switching my hat a little bit from the Niagara Region Anti-Racism Association to the City of St. Catharines Anti-Racism Advisory Committee, which I'm also chair of, we did actually make some recommendations to the city staff on how to get at that. Because at least in St. Catharines, there's usually a fair at a city facility where people who are interested can come and find out more. But that's not proactive enough, we think, for exactly the point, the reason you said, that there needs to be proactive, initiatives to outreach to diverse communities who don't know, and to educate them a bit about what are these committees. Many people who have kids, their kids play sports, so they might be interested in the recreation committee or a committee that deal with parks. I mean, there's every part of our life that intersects with these committees. And then, that way people can apply and then maybe have a clinic to help people figure out how to answer the application questions, which can seem a bit vague sometimes.
Well, I think that it's a great idea because it's also, I think, a good stepping stone to even being in politics, I guess, to take the conversation in a different direction, because we want to get diverse voices and people who aren't necessarily the norm to be able to do that. But that's intimidating too, right? So having that opportunity to maybe have a stepping stone as being part of a committee, you can see a little bit more about the process. Could you give us a mini education on those committees, Saleh, since you're, of course, very familiar with them? Are they paid positions? How much time does it take?
Yeah, you're exactly right about that stuff, because going in cold and running for office when you haven't even been involved in the city, it can seem like you don't really have the qualifications. So being on one of these advisory committees is really a great step. They often meet just once a month, maybe for an hour or so. And there's all different kinds. Some of them have some judicial power, like the Committee of Adjustment, which looks at exceptions for zoning rules and bylaws for construction, things like that. But pretty much anything that you do in the city will have some kind of advisory committee, because council wants to hear from residents. So it could be things like, I think the heritage committees actually don't get a lot of BIPOC appointments or applications, but if you read a book, maybe you could be on the library board. Are you interested in history? Maybe you could be on the museum board. And by law, every municipality has to have an accessibility advisory committee. So if you have any kind of disability, it doesn't have to be visible or physical. You might be able to be on the accessibility advisory committee. And if you look at the city websites, usually under the council section, they have an advisory committee of council, and there's different kinds. Probably everybody could find something that they'd be interested in, and it's not that big of a commitment. Like I said, just maybe a meeting a month for an hour, and maybe some hour of work in between. And it's a great way to find out about how the city works. And if you're thinking you might want to run at some point for office, then this is a great way to get your feet wet and to show that you can do something.
Yeah, thank you for that, Saleh. I appreciate, that's a great, I guess, greater conversation into what we're talking about here. So now you mentioned that you do believe that the board has made their decision about who has been selected. When will we find out exactly who that is?
On the 23rd is when the regional council ratifies the selection committee's choice. Now, the selection committee is 5 people. 3 of them are the regional councillors on the police board, plus 2 other councillors who were picked at a regional council meeting. So there's still time to change it. I don't know who they picked, and we won't really know until after they finalize it, so probably after the 23rd, because, in case they change their mind or something, then, it's personally identifying information of the person who applied is confidential. So it'll be some time before we find out and, who they picked. But, hey, if they had another choice, and if they didn't pick somebody who's fully civilian or somebody who's also BIPOC, then they still have time, I think, to change their mind. But if they didn't have a choice because not enough people applied, then that's not good enough. And the region needs to proactively recruit applications from outside wider circles.
And how often are these boards changing over? Is it annual?
No. Interestingly, the city of St. Catharines seems to be making some of their board chair appointments for deputy mayor every 2 years, but usually it's for the 4-year term. Now, the province appoints 3 people, but when there's a new regional council, a new election, that'll be in 2026, I believe, then the regional council will pick the appointees to the board, and then a selection committee to pick the public representative, which is somebody who's not a municipal official, not a municipal employee, just someone like you or me.
Right. All right. Saleh, interesting. Always great to chat with you. If people want to find out more about the Niagara Region Anti-Racism Association, where should they go?
Well, our socials are the NRARA. Unfortunately, our website's not that updated. That's nrara.org. But if you look at our socials, you can see the letter that we sent to regional councillors and stay in touch with us. And thanks, as always, for having me on, Steph. As you said, I'm Saleh Waziruddin with the Niagara Region Anti-Racism Association.
Thank you. We'll talk to you soon.
Thanks. Bye.
Saleh Waziruddin from the Niagara Region Anti-Racism Association discussing his open letter and the police board with the region.